Hey, what's up, viewer? This is day 6, hour 3 of this Nebulous live development creation series, and at the end of the last video, I was just about to test whether or not these buttons are now adding the active selection element to the economy deficit, and whether or not they are increasing the actual infrastructure value. So I need to remember that I need to set this to at least 1 to do investments. And then from here I do believe I can enter play mode. And once I've entered play mode, I will make the selection, which looks like it's, let's see, iterate player economy. So the issue is that the queue is not the issue seems to simply be the fact that the queue is not initialized. So more or less it's kind of like player data.current investing queue and player data.current investing queue is .length or .count is greater than 0. In this case, it won't complain. Whoops. In this case, it will not complain about. I think this is gonna be mad than doing this. I could try this to start with. And it makes sense that this would be on the outside. Because if it counts 0, it doesn't even have to, doesn't matter what the investment parallel value is. Therefore, let's give this a shot. So if this is correct, it will not be freaking out when the economy ticks. And it is still managing to freak out, so it's looking like now the problem is simply the fact that nothing has initialized this value. Which leaves me with having to manually initialize it, or possibly go like this. And let's see if that works. It doesn't expose itself to the inspector anyway. And so now let's see if it will tick the economy properly. It should say +5, and it should start ticking the economy. And not freak out. Okay, good. And now if I select the planet, the economy button should not be clickable. Or no, I guess it can be clickable, can't it? And the clear button doesn't matter. But if I click the investment button, and here I'm actually going to full screen it just to get a better feel for it. I should effectively increase the economy value of the planet, and that should increase the deficit. And I'm not seeing the deficit change. I'm not seeing I'm also seeing the button is still active, which it should not be. it still didn't act like the button was clicked. So let me double check the naming. Invest in active selection economy button. I'm pretty sure it's correct. Invest in active selection economy button, so that's spelled correctly. It should have set itself to false. And economy clear can stay to true, so I'm not sure why that didn't work actually. I need to leave play mode and not do it maximize so I can take a look at the inspector values. Okay, so I do selection and I click on this. I'm not seeing anything changing in the data. And I'm not seeing the button get deactivated either. So it's not disabling itself. It would appear. That's a little strange. And then does the planet have a economy? It's not exposing itself. So it's not showing me the value of the particular planet. So I'm not sure if it's actually increasing that. Alright, so it looks like I am screwing up something here, so I'm not sure. I'm going to attempt to debug this. It should be deactivating the button, as the scan button can get deactivated when it can't be afforded. Except for it's taking a second to recompile the assemblies here, so I apologize for that. I'm surprised this is throwing me off a little bit. It shouldn't be messing itself up so much. Alright, so if I grab the planet and click invest, it is very simply not firing the trigger. Okay, so what about right here? It's supposed to run on start. Maybe I forgot to attach a component or something. Because that was on start and it didn't run. Pretty sure I have that set up already on the UI, don't I? I guess I don't have it on there. So I need to add infrastructure investment elements to this. And now these buttons will actually work properly. So I must have just forgotten a component. That happens. With Unity, that can happen. What can I say? So in this instance, maybe some magic will happen and we will see. Except for in this instance, so that didn't find invest in active selection scanning frequency button. Let's double check naming convention here. Invest in active selection frequency button. Isn't that the same thing? Invest in active selection frequency button. I'm rather sure. Maybe it's just scanning frequency. I guess this one needs to say scanning. And we'll save that, and the code should be the same. And now we should see it work kind of correctly on the economy. So if I click this, what happens? Once again, we're running into an issue where okay, so what I did was I changed this to Q, didn't I? And essentially, I'm in fact in-queuing the current active selections economy infrastructure component. Wait a minute, so if it's clicked, I want it to in-queue, in fact. And in the event that the clear is clicked, I actually want to remove it, but I don't know if I can do that. Okay, so actually in this instance, I'm not sure. What if I say clear with a... I guess it doesn't work. So our list makes more sense because I can do the remove, add, remove thing. Alright, so I'm actually just not sure. I'm going to have to Google something. I'm going to have to Google the Unity 3D C# remove element from a queue. Okay, so the idea I'm kind of getting is to do one of each. There needs to be a list of the values. And if there's a list of values, you can simply... I could remove the list backwards, I suppose. And that would preserve the quote-unquote top of the queue, and then I could add at the bottom. But I don't know if that's efficient or not. I could make a list that can dynamically change and then equate it to a queue. But then you're almost asking for the queue to reassign after each DQ in queue to the list. And they could just like map each other back and forth. I'm not thinking of any other really dynamic solution for that part. The queue just happens to work for the parallel ideal. If it all went through the list, I can make it work a little different. So for now I'm going to do this weird thing where I'm going to use two separate data structures. They essentially have to get matched each time an investment is added or removed, which changes the list. And anytime the queue finishes its DQ in queue. So upon excuse me. So if there's nothing investing, it doesn't matter. But if it did invest something, after it's completed its DQ in queue, the player data's current investing list needs to basically equal player data's current investing queue. But like to I guess in this instance it makes it an array. What if I can say copy to list? So I'd have to say to array, but make a new list of... I'm not so sure about this particular idea. Excuse me. But we're taking list, ifloat iterate, and we're essentially passing an array into it so it like clones as a list. We're using a generic list collection. And that just allows us to make an addition to the list, which allows us to change the queue anytime we add or remove from the list. So like over here, if we invest economy in okay, so basically in this instance we want to take the list and we still want to do the remove thing. So we want to remove the economy infrastructure component. Same thing here, we are saying list.add, or adding this component. And so now we're at economy invest, clicked, adds it to the list, but it also has to take the queue and it needs to equal a new queue of iFloatedArray interface and we need to pass it in, I guess, an array, maybe a list, an IEnumerable, which is our player data dot current investing list, which is an IEnumerable. So now we've achieved parity between the queue and the list, which do separate things. There's probably a way to use an algorithm to just use the list, so I don't know if this is necessary, but I know to use the queue for this in particular, so I feel like going that way. So now it's effectively the same exact thing here. We're just changing the list, but then assigning the queue with the new list. So if the queue has to do anything, it will take effect, or essentially it will incorporate the new difference into the queue. And then the queue will pick up the process of cycling it through the investment system, which is supposed to increase its value. Alright, so we'll have to copy it down here in the event it works properly. And if it does, we should effectively okay, so the last time it wasn't, oh no, because the component wasn't added. Okay, so I'm just going to have to take a look at this and see how it goes. I've got to fix these buttons. I missed a setting or something. So I select this, I click invest, it properly deactivates, that's good. Let's see, the economy is not changing. What about the, oh, no, it doesn't show this value. Which I'm a little surprised by. It's because it's alright, so at least this part's working. So if I come in here and I clear this, okay, now it says economy is 43. Okay, so that's a piece of the puzzle. Yeah, I should be taking up like 60 right now, basically. And if I clear this, now if I come back, it should be at 50, 63, 63. Okay. Precisely. So I'm missing some things, that's for sure, but alright, so there's a good shot that this is 63. I almost feel like I have to go into the iterator and And even if I increase each of them, okay, so even if I increase them, it's not changing the economy. Which I thought it was going to. And it is not updating the UI value on every single updated value. So perhaps over here I can, because essentially here it's assigning, or it's changing the component. And here I'm looking at okay, so these buttons are including it in the system. But in fact, there's actually an economy value. Let's try active economy value. And in fact, I know that I've changed those elsewhere, put their proper name on them. Active selection economy value. So in this instance, the active selection's economy value needs to update anytime it's changed. So I need to effectively come down here and like maybe go like this instead, so I can organize it like this, but I have to take the economy value dot register value changed callback. Change event suddenly still a floating point. And I have to do a lambda if it will allow me here. Let's see what it wants. Actually, I'll show it once here. It says economy value. That doesn't make any sense. I'm rather sure I need to put something in here. I want to call it this, but it's getting upset. Okay, so now maybe I can put the lambda in and see if it will be less angry. And it looks like it is... Oh, it says label doesn't have this going on. It does have a register callback. Let me double check if it has any other tie-ins for its value changing. There's not, so essentially we would have to register some kind of callback. And I'm forgetting the type that goes in here. A T event type. And then just squeak in the lambda, see if it works or not. In this instance, I guess there's a value. And it's mad that something like this, or what? Or event type with a float, maybe, or something? I guess that's not correct either. Oh, it says it's not generic, but then if I say T, he gets upset here that this isn't type. Okay, so I'm just going to check out the code because I forgot how I did this. There's another code that was changing something else. Let me go look. Oops, maybe it was in active scanning elements. Alright, so I registered a change event. As a float. And that would be in the instance that the label changes its text value, or more or less. So what if I can do a string here? And so the goal of this was actually to change the I'm trying to update this value anytime the value is changed through the iteration system. So I think this is going the wrong direction. I can't register a callback on this. It's going to need something different. It's going to need I suppose the economy value I guess it is also active selection specific. So it could check the active selection values and see if they're different, but the other option would be perhaps using a getter or a function, and anytime wherever the value increases, it also has to update the economy ticker. If that's the value that's changed. So I'm trying to figure out how I should do this. Basically, the best thing would, or the easiest thing would be to check the active selection every time and compare its previous values to any current values, and if there's no difference, and then the values don't have to change, and if there is a difference, then the values can change. And then that only has to happen if there is an active selection with specific components. So let's consider this for alright, so where do I want to do this again? Let's see here. Basically in here I want to say if this gets changed, it's got to check it's got to check if the active selection has changed its values or something. So the first thing that comes to mind would be player data. And we have a current active selection. And beneath this we actually are going to need, we're going to need to change, or we're going to need to save the active selections. Darn, I'm actually wondering what I should call this, because am I just going to have 9 variables for each? I mean, I don't know what else to do. So if I could do this, but it's just a float underneath it anyway, and I could in fact just change this to a float. And there's possibly a smarter system where it would not have to check every frame, it would just react to a change in the system. Otherwise, it would slow down. But for now, this makes sense. So they go through this again. And from here we've got we almost don't even want these to be displayed in the inspector, but we'll also display them there anyway just for debugging sake. And effectively, once all of these values have shifted, we have to do a nice big if block and say if player data dot previous economy infrastructure is less than or is not equal to player data dot get component economy infrastructure dot value. Once again, it's like caching this makes some sense. I just don't feel like it's necessary at the moment. But essentially this, if it's not equal, then the code has to go into the proper element, And we're going to we basically just need to grab a label, which is the active selection economy value. And we've got to set this value to we are using this a few times. Essentially this value, yes. And then we also have to set player data dot active selection previous economy infrastructure. Oh, okay. So we're gonna have to split this up into 2 lines, but that's alright. But we need to make sure that the player data previous value is now equal to the new value. Gosh, I'm sorry for my voice. A couple places we could perhaps pull out that component. Seems like a good time to do this, I'm just going to do it. Alright, so now we should have the label update every time the active selection economy's infrastructure value increased as well. Alright, so if I select this and take a look, if I click invest, it should start going up every turn. So for this is missing. Okay, so I messed that up. It's supposed to be player data dot current active selection dot get component. Give it a second to compile it. And now it shouldn't have any issues with null reference exceptions. Let's take a look. So now if this works correctly, I should get the economy value updating whenever it's invested within. So I click this. Okay, now it's going to go up. So that's how I want this to work, except for missing one part, which is if this economy is going up, then this tick needs to go up, and this needs to go up every tick. So let me try clearing this. And it still says 19 there, so... Okay, so that's close. We've got to get the actual economy values updating also then, don't we? It's just a little iffy, but if the economy value changes, then of course the... Okay, but this is happening a few different ways. This could be happening a few different ways per turn, though, is the thing. Anytime any economy value increases, it effectively needs to increase the player data, a certain player data value, which is the tick game per tick. Alright, so if there was some kind of system that like grabbed every single one of those components every turn and used them, that would make some sense, but the idea is if it increases or it's almost like my interface is breaking down already. Like, if I didn't even go with the interface, I would just be defining it component by component, and then anytime an economy component increases, the economy takes a tweak to its total tick value, but then it goes down the list and maybe has to decrease some values here or there, but eventually gets down to a value. And that would be better than redoing it every single frame, basically. Man, so the interface just breaks down. It breaks this down to some extent. Alright, so if I'm actually going to change this, it's going to break all of this, basically. But instead I would just have lists of each of those particular components getting invested within. And they would simply I'm just considering the order of things here. If the economy has to iterate, and upon those iterations are where the potential increases in economy come from, then essentially they might as well just happen every time in there if it's an economy option. Have to really, I mean, probably just gonna have to really split up the components. For some reason, Q still seems like it might work though, because I guess I could check in here if the So if, for instance, invested dot is value to string get type, if invested dot get type is equivalent to type of economy infrastructure, and the value goes up, yes, but the player data that total economy gain per tick also needs to iterate. And in the event there are other values, they don't have to change the economy directly. This also allows for multiple economy infrastructures to change the total gain per tick all in one go, basically. And the tick just gets counted once. So if there's like a bunch of things that grab the tick, it doesn't have to, they can all sum up first. So in this instance, the tick value should go up, which means the economy will go up. It should go up properly. So let's take a look here. Alright, so if I click on this, we've got 5, and I click invest, it goes up to 6, and it's going up here, and the ticks are going up too. Perfect. So I can clear this, and let's say I've just doubled my economy, basically. That is actually exactly how I want it to work, so that's good. So that's a slight audible that worked. I was able to just cast by the concrete type of the interface out of the list, or out of the queue. Okay, so this is giving me an issue. It makes sense where I can invest in this, for instance, and it's going to, so this screwed up because I was investing and then left to the object. And it's saying, yeah, it's saying the current active selection doesn't have an economy infrastructure, and that's true because it doesn't have a, darn it, this isn't exactly correct. Alright, so it can be investing, but it's not the active selection. So I can't rely on the active selection here to do this particular work. I'm trying to use the active selections to make it work. I suppose this is an if the, so this is more like if there is a current active selection. So if there's a current active selection, then it has to check if there's a difference. And if there's a difference, it needs to update its economy value. That's basically it for that. And the investing list is based off the investment queue anyway. Okay, so if that worked, we should have I should be able to start investing in the planet, but then deselect the planet. And keep the investments increasing, is the idea. So click here, invest, and it would be going up. If I leave this planet, I should still be getting the increase, and it is happening. Okay, good. Then I can start like doing other stuff. Like, I guess the main thing would be we could select it and then start doing scans. So now if I try to do like a scan like this, it's not that expensive. So I could jack up the frequency and have a couple scans left over. And then I realize, oh, I really need to invest in like I'm going to need to invest in scan frequency also, or something like that, to scan further. More or less. Okay, so that's kind of working. Actually, the economy, get it up to like 60 and then we'll shift over or something. And then the idea would be, once again, you could just save up like huge AoE scans off the bat if you wanted to. Therefore, we would look at perhaps like we have plenty of economy here, so and you'll start burning through the scans in no time at all. You'll start burning through the resources in no time at all with a scan setup that goes up like this. So the next piece of the puzzle is going to be simply buffing our scan radius and scan frequency. Which have scan range makes perfect sense. You start to buff it and this number goes up. Frequency is different though because we've basically hard capped our frequency at like 10. So like I'm not sure about scan frequency. It can't just go up linearly without completely rebalancing how the colors go between 1 and 10. It would have to really change. So that's going to require some consideration. For how investing into that's supposed to work. Alright, so I'm out with this right now. I've got to make some serious design decisions about scanning range and scanning frequency, but it's just about to be at the point where the player has the ability to invest in their own infrastructure, and that infrastructure actually affects their other mechanics to some degree. Like these things affect how many scans you can do, and then research will affect this. The orbital building will affect how quickly ships can get built, and then there's even potential for other values as they come along. So I have the UI properly working here, so it will just come down to a matter of balancing how this scales up. Is really the tough thing I've got to deal with. So I'm going to call this video for now since it's over an hour, and I appreciate it if you've watched it up to this point. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.